The alarms screamed through the prison like a siren from hell. Red lights flashed down the long concrete hallways of Greystone Penitentiary as guards shouted orders over the intercom. All units report to Block C. We have an escape. Repeat, inmate escaped. But what no one could explain was how. The cameras had gone black for exactly 47 seconds. The cell door to inmate number 45719, real name, Ethan Cole, had opened on its own. And somehow, he had walked out. No tunnels, no stolen key, no inside help. Just gone. When the first guard reached his cell, the bed was neatly made. His shoes were lined up by the wall. And there, on the concrete floor, written in white chalk, were 3 chilling words. I'm not free. By morning, federal agents had arrived. The warden barked orders, cameras were checked, and every door was inspected. Nothing made sense. There were no footprints outside, no signs of struggle, and no trace of Ethan anywhere on the property. But the strangest part, Ethan wasn't supposed to be there anymore. According to the system, he had been released 3 years ago. That was the part that sent chills through every officer in the building. Because that meant, whoever had escaped last night wasn't supposed to exist at all. And somewhere in the dark, far beyond those prison walls, Ethan Cole was running for his life, without knowing he was never meant to escape in the first place. 2 weeks earlier, before the alarms, before the chaos, Ethan sat quietly in his cell, a small, gray box that smelled like rust and rain. He had been at Greystone Penitentiary for 9 years, serving time for a robbery gone wrong. Or at least, that's what the files said. The truth was more complicated. Ethan always said he didn't remember the night of the robbery. 1 minute, he was driving home from work, and the next, he woke up in the back of a police car with a gun in his hand and blood on his jacket. The police said it was an open-and-shut case. A store clerk was dead, $2,000 was missing, and Ethan's fingerprints were everywhere. His lawyer gave up before the trial even started. But Ethan knew, deep down, that something was wrong. He just didn't know what. His only friend inside was Marcus Reed, a soft-spoken man with tattoos crawling up his arms. Marcus worked laundry duty and had access to almost every cell in the block. The two often talked late into the night, whispering about the outside world, freedom, and what life could have been if fate had been kinder. One night, Marcus leaned close to Ethan's bunk and said, "You ever wonder why no one visits you?" Ethan frowned. "I don't have anyone left." Marcus shook his head. "No, man. That's not what I mean. I checked the visitor logs. You had someone listed for visitation last year, but it got denied. Not by security. By records." Ethan froze. "Denied by records?" Marcus nodded. "Someone doesn't want you seen." From that moment, something in Ethan changed. Days passed, and Ethan started noticing strange things. Guards whispering near his cell, papers missing from his file, and a few nights when his food tray arrived late, or not at all. Then one morning, a guard named Officer Daniels, who'd always been friendly, slipped something through the bars, a folded note. Inside were 2 words, midnight. Be ready. Ethan's heart raced. When the clock struck 12, the lights in Block C flickered. The door to his cell made a faint click. He stood, unsure, as the metal latch slowly lifted on its own. He pushed it, and it opened. No alarms. No footsteps. Just silence. He hesitated, then stepped into the hallway. Every door around him was still locked tight. The cameras in the corner were dead. Small red lights that should have been blinking were completely dark. He started walking, heart pounding, each step louder than the last. When he reached the main corridor, he saw something that made him stop cold. A man in a guard uniform standing by the gate, waiting. Daniels. He motioned for Ethan to follow. "Come on. You're not safe here." "Not safe?" Ethan whispered. "What are you talking about?" Daniels didn't answer. He led him through the service tunnel, down a narrow flight of stairs that smelled of oil and bleach. "Keep your head down," he muttered. Finally, they stopped by a metal door. Daniels handed Ethan a flashlight and a small folded envelope. "When you get outside, go north until you hit the fence. There's a gap under the wire. After that, follow the dirt road until you see a sign for Highway 9. Someone will meet you there." Ethan stared at the envelope. "Who's meeting me?" Daniels looked him dead in the eye. "The people who put you here." Then, before Ethan could ask anything else, the door opened, and a rush of cold air hit his face. He was outside. Freedom. For a moment, it felt unreal. The stars, the wind, the silence. He dropped to his knees and breathed it in. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. But something felt off. Too easy. He looked back at the prison and noticed something terrifying. Every light was on. Every guard tower was still active. There were no alarms, no searchlights, no sirens. It was like no one even knew he was gone. He turned the envelope over in his hands. On the back was one line, written in black ink. "You were never here." And that's when it hit him. This wasn't an escape. It was a setup. Before he could move, a car engine roared in the distance. Headlights flashed across the trees. Someone was coming. Ethan ran toward the fence, his breath sharp and quick, the cold biting his skin. When he reached the barbed wire, he dropped to the ground and crawled through the small gap just as the car skidded to a stop behind him. "Hey!" a voice shouted. "Don't move." Gunshots cracked through the air. Dirt exploded around him. He sprinted into the woods, tripping, falling, crawling through the darkness until the shots faded into silence. He didn't stop until dawn. By the time the sun rose, he was miles away, clothes torn, face cut, heart racing. He pulled out the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. A photo of himself, but younger, wearing a police badge. And written across the bottom were the words, "Officer Ethan Cole, case terminated, 2010. His blood ran cold. He wasn't just a prisoner. He was a man who had been erased. And now, the people who did it knew he was alive. Ethan looked around the endless woods, clutching the photo. He realized something horrifying. The escape wasn't meant to happen. It was meant to finish what they started. And this time, they wouldn't leave any record behind. The sun rose over the dense trees, painting the forest in shades of orange and gold. Ethan Cole sat against a broken log, shivering. His hands were cut, his face bruised, and his mind was racing faster than his heart. The photograph burned in his pocket like it carried fire. Officer Ethan Cole. The words didn't make sense. He had no memory of ever being a cop. He had spent the last 9 years believing he was a criminal. And yet, everything about the picture looked real. His smile, the badge, even the old police station behind him. He pushed himself to his feet, dizzy from exhaustion. He needed to think. If the photo was real, then his entire life, his arrest, his sentence, everything, had been built on a lie. But who would go through all the trouble to erase a man's identity and lock him away? And why? He remembered what Daniel said before the escape. The people who put you here. That meant there were others. More powerful than guards, maybe even higher than the prison warden. Maybe the kind of people who could make a person disappear with just one piece of paper. He walked for hours, following the dirt road Daniels had mentioned. His legs hurt, and his stomach ached with hunger, but stopping wasn't an option. Every sound in the woods made him flinch, the rustle of branches, the crunch of leaves, even the distant hum of an engine. Whoever had fired those shots last night could still be looking for him. After what felt like forever, he reached an old gas station on the side of the road. The place looked abandoned, one flickering light, a rusted sign, and a cracked window. He checked his reflection in the glass. His hair was messy, his face pale and hollow. If anyone saw him like this, they'd think he was just another runaway. He stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled, and a man behind the counter looked up. He was in his 50s, with thick glasses and a beard that reached his chest. "You lost, son?" the man asked, squinting. "Just need some water," Ethan said quietly, reaching into his pocket. All he had was the photo. The man studied him for a moment, then shrugged and grabbed a bottle from the cooler. "You look like you've been through hell." "You could say that," Ethan muttered. As the man handed over the bottle, his eyes flicked to the picture Ethan was holding. "That you?" he asked. Ethan froze. "Yeah, it's me. You recognize it?" The man frowned. "I don't forget faces. You used to come around here, years ago. Weren't you a cop?" Ethan's throat went dry. "You remember me?" "Sure do," the man said, looking uneasy now. "You were with the sheriff's office. Then one day, there was news that you'd been arrested. I thought it was strange. They said you robbed a store." He shook his head. "Never made sense to me. You didn't seem like that kind." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Do you remember anyone I worked with? Any names?" The man hesitated. "There was one guy, older, white hair, always wore a hat. Chief something. Haven't seen him in years." "Wait." He stopped mid-sentence and looked out the window. "You didn't come here in a car, did you?" Ethan turned. 2 black SUVs were pulling up on the dirt road. "Get down," the man hissed. He grabbed Ethan by the arm and pulled him toward the back room. "There's a door behind the shelves. Leads out to the woods. Go now." Ethan didn't wait. He ducked through the narrow passage just as the bell above the front door jingled again. He heard boots, the sound of voices, low, professional, the kind that didn't belong to small-town police. He ran until his lungs burned, the forest swallowing him again. Behind him, the sound of engines faded. He stopped by a stream, his heart pounding. The world around him was silent, almost too silent. Then his phone, the one he didn't even remember having, buzzed. He pulled it out, confused. It was an old model, scuffed and dirty. There was only one message on the screen. "Stop running. You were never supposed to know." His hands shook. He looked around, but there was no one. How could anyone know where he was? He turned the phone over and saw something scratched into the plastic casing. A set of numbers. Coordinates. He typed them into the GPS. The location was only a few miles away, an abandoned sheriff's station, the same one from the photo. He hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. But what if it wasn't? What if the answers he needed were waiting there? He took a deep breath and started walking. By the time he reached the building, the sky was turning red with sunset. The sheriff's station was crumbling, windows broken, weeds growing through the steps. The sign above the door was half missing, but he could still make out the faded words, Gray County Sheriff's Department. He stepped inside. The air smelled like dust and rot. Papers were scattered across the floor, old evidence boxes piled in the corner. He moved carefully, flashlight in hand, until he found the office that looked just like the one in his photograph. The desk was still there, cracked, covered in dust. He pulled open a drawer and froze. Inside were dozens of files, all stamped with the same red word, sealed. He flipped through them, missing persons, police corruption cases, false arrests. And then he saw it, his name. Cole, Ethan J. Status, transferred. Reason, internal cover order. Notes, confidential. Do not disclose to federal authorities. Ethan's stomach turned. Internal cover order. That meant someone in law enforcement had buried his identity on purpose. He looked closer and saw another note scribbled at the bottom in pen. Code red, witness protocol, remove target. He dropped the file, his heart pounding so loud it echoed. He wasn't just framed, he was silenced. He was a witness to something, and they had locked him away to keep him quiet. But what had he seen? Before he could look for more, the sound of boots echoed in the hallway. He ducked behind the desk as flashlights cut through the darkness. Voices murmured, the same cold tone he'd heard at the gas station. Check every room. He's here. Ethan's breath hitched. The lights got closer. He looked toward the back of the room. An old vent cover was hanging loose. Without thinking, he crawled toward it, pried it open, and slipped inside. The metal was freezing, the space tight. He tried not to make a sound as the men entered the office. Anything? One asked. Nothing yet. But he's close. Daniels said he took the bait. Ethan's eyes widened. Daniels, the guard who'd helped him escape, had been part of it all along. Then another voice, deeper, colder, spoke. Let him run. He'll lead us straight to the rest. The footsteps moved away, and the room went silent again. Ethan crawled forward, trembling, until he reached the end of the vent. It opened behind the building, right near the trees. He stepped out, breathing hard. The night air was cold again, but he didn't feel it. His mind was spinning. He had proof now, real evidence that someone inside law enforcement had erased his life. But there was something worse. If they wanted him to lead them to the rest, it meant there were others. Maybe more like him, people erased, hidden, replaced. He took out the file he'd managed to grab and stared at the last page. There was a list of names. At the top was his. Below it were 3 more. The last name on the list made his blood run cold. Marcus Reed. His cellmate. The only person he had trusted. He realized, in that moment, the escape wasn't about setting him free. It was about leading them to Marcus and finishing what they started years ago. Ethan looked toward the dark highway and started running again. He had to find Marcus before they did. Because if they reached him first, it would all be over. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan knew this was only the beginning.